Welcome everybody. This is our first class of the Mosaic stitches in the Mix and Match Blanket Club. Sorry, I still have this cough. I apologize. I have my cough drop. I have my water. So I'm going to demonstrate a couple of them to you today. Really, I'm going to demonstrate one to you all the way through, and then I'm going to show you how it's the same no matter which pattern you pick. It's really the basics of mosaic crochet. But I am going to demonstrate the first one. This is the one I'm going to go all the way through. This is number 24 on page 53. This is the Tartan Vibe. I really like this block. I think it's really a lot of fun. And then we're going to look at Blocky Spots, which is another mosaic stitch. And then the last one I'm going to show you is, and that's number 26. And then I'm going to show you 27, which is tiny dots, which even look a little bit like hearts, the way the stitches get pulled in. But they all use the same technique of mosaic crochet. So let's get started. I'm going to do it on bigger, on my bigger yarn. I'm going to plan ahead and pull some off here. And let's switch to our camera. Okay. Okay. So we're going to start with the Tartan Vibe. This one starts with a multiple, if you're doing a row of single crochet, I'm sorry, a row of chains and then a row of single crochet, it's a multiple of 7 plus 8. If you're going to do the foundation single crochet, which is what I've done here, then it's a multiple of 7 plus 7 more. The 8th stitch would be the turning chain, and you don't need a turning chain when you're doing your a foundation single crochet. So I'm just going to double check that I've got a multiple of 7 plus 7 here. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Perfect. So I'll go through, it'll be a smaller version, but you'll get the idea of how that works. So this takes the place of doing rows 1 and 2 in your pattern. Again, you can always do a row of chains and then a row of single, and you end up in the same place. Okay. Mosaic crochet involves using 2 colors to get like an overlapping effect. So you can pick, they don't have to be high contrast colors. In this case, I did pick high contrast colors, but when I did the tiny dots block, I picked lower contrast colors, and it still looks great. So you can pick and choose. They don't have to be high contrast. One of your colors, I'm just thinking how you could use this in other things, could be a color changing yarn. So you're still only using 2 yarns, but one of them could change colors as it goes. What's nice about this, and I have ends here because I made my swatch and then I demonstrated on my swatch earlier, so I did cut, but you're going to carry your yarn up. So even though you're using 2 colors, you're not going to have ends. The only reason I have ends here is because I did a section and then I cut the yarn to do something else and came back to it. So here's one whole repeat, and I've only got the 2 ends, beginning and end. So that's a nice benefit of mosaic crochet, is that you get the color work effect without having a whole bunch of ends. Something else you should know. I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks along the way because it won't necessarily make sense until we do it. Let's see. Oh, I did want to share with you. I'm going to stop sharing here just for a second. In your book, on page 138, she gives a really good basic tutorial on mosaic crochet. So if what we're doing here doesn't quite fit it for you, or you're out and about and you don't have access to the video, know that all of this information is here. She talks about changing your color here, and she talks about the MDC, which stands for mosaic double crochet, which is the stitch we're going to use in all of these mosaic patterns. So on page 138, there is a really good tutorial. Uses a lot of the same terminology I'm going to use here. So I found it very helpful. It was very well written. So know that you have that in the back of your book. All right, I'm going to get started, and then I'm going to give you some tips as we go along. All right. So the first thing we're going to do, if you look at the end of row 2, she says if you were doing a chain and then a row of singles, you're going to single all the way across CC to B and turn. So you're going to have a color A and a color B. I started with my color A. The yellow will be my color B. And you are going to switch. She's going to tell you when to switch to your new color at the end of the row. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, and this is how I always change colors in crochet. I'm going to take out the last foundation single crochet I made there. All right, so I'm going to do my last foundation single crochet, or you could just be doing your last single crochet. So there's the chain 1. And now I need to do my final yarn over and pull through to finish the single. I am going to do that in my new color. All I'm going to do is leave yourself a tail that you're comfortable with. My final yarn over will be, let me adjust it's so bright. There we go. Will be in my new color and pull it through. What that does, and then I'm going to take my 2 tails and just kind of tidy up the stitches. It allows you to complete the stitch in the color you were using, but pulls up your new color ready to start your next row. And you don't get a jog. If you don't get this old color kind of coming up into the next row. It finishes the row in color A and allows you to start color B on the next row. So that's how you change color. And I will be demonstrating this all the way through, okay? But that's what CC means, change color. So now we're starting on row 3. I advise, if you are new to mosaic crochet, and if you're using the written instructions, or if you're using the chart, either way, have some highlighter tape or a Post-it to keep track of your row that you're on, because the rows are going to be very similar. And if you put it down in the middle, you'll know what color you're on, but you may not know what row you're on. So whatever technique you like for keeping track. The other thing you're going to want to do is manage your yarn, because I'm going to have 2 colors here. I'm going to flip my messy desk here. I'm just going to turn the camera a little bit. So I've got my gray and my yellow, and they're separate. And as I'm working, when I switch colors, I found as I was working through and I got a few rows in, I found myself turning the same way every time so that my yarns didn't get twisted. But when you turn to start your new color, take a minute and switch your yarns so that you don't have a twist, okay? So there's just a little bit of yarn management there. that you need to be aware of. The other thing you need to know about mosaic crochet is that we're going to change colors every 2 rows, which means I'm going to do a row across and a row back. So you will always be changing colors on the same end. Right? All right, row 3, which is a right side row. In this pattern, the odd numbers are your right side. I'm going to chain 1 and turn. You are always going to start with a single crochet in the first stitch, and you're always going to end with a single crochet in the last stitch in these patterns. In all 3 that I did today that I'm going to demonstrate. So I'm going to guess that it's probably the same for all of them. If you have a hard time recognizing where your beginnings and your ends are, remember you can mark the first stitch. So when you make your very first single in here, you put a marker right there, because you know when you go across and you come back, your last stitch will be going into this single crochet right here. You won't be going into any turning chains in these projects. Okay, so we start with a single and we're going to chain 3. Mosaic crochet incorporates a lot of creating chain spaces. When I chain 3, I'm going to skip 2 stitches and then I'm going to make a single. Anytime you make a chain in mosaic crochet, you're always going to chain 1 more chain than the number of stitches that you're skipping. And what this allows for is that you're going to be have to making stitches in front of these chains, and it keeps it from pulling in too tight. It just gives you a little bit of breathing room. So if I were to turn mine over here, so this is what the back of your work is going to look like. It's not a completely reversible project, although I will talk about this at the end, that there's an option to do that. But here are the chain spaces that you make. They alternate in color. But because they're loose enough, we gave 1 extra chain for the number of stitches, there's no puckering. It allows it to lay flat and has plenty of stretch and give, okay? So if it tells you to chain 3, you know you're going to skip 2 stitches. If it tells you to chain 5, you're going to skip 4. That's just kind of a rule of thumb with this mosaic crochet. I have seen that in other patterns. Not every pattern that I've done in mosaic crochet, but it's a good rule of thumb to do. All right, here's where our repeat starts. Chain 2, skip 1 stitch. For the time being, I'm going to have you look at the top of your stitch. If you have a hard time recognizing where the post of the stitch is, use the top of the stitch so you know what to skip, okay? I'm going to skip 1 stitch, and I'm going to make 4 single crochets now in a row. So 1, doesn't mean 4 into 1, just means I'm making a total of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, chain 2, skip 1 stitch, 1 single crochet, and that's your repeat. So you will repeat that all the way across until you get to your last 3 stitches. And I have 3 stitches left. 1, 2, 3. And I am going to chain 3. I'm going to skip 2 stitches and put a single in my last stitch. Okay. So that's our first row. We created some singles and we created some chain spaces here. Row 4, sticking with the same color because you have to do 2 rows in each color, chain 1 and turn, is going to mimic what you've just done. Chain 1, 1 single in the first. Chain 3. It says to skip the chain 3 space, which is this one you made previously. one single in the next. Now here, you can look at the top of the stitch. Remember, when you are turning your crochet work back and forth, and so we've worked across one side and now we're working on the other, the top of this stitch is always going to be slightly to the left. It is more noticeable in double crochets than it is in single crochets, okay? But you don't want to go into the chain space, you want to go into the stitch. I'm going to put a single there. And now I'm going to hit my repeat, chain 2, skip the chain 2 space and put 4 single crochets. So 1. So we're really putting the same thing on top of what we did in the previous row. And that will be a theme in mosaic crochet. Chain 2, skip the chain 2 space, 1 single, chain 3, so I've gotten to my end, skip the chain 3 space, put 1 single, CC to A, and turn. So I've done the first part of my single. Here's what I ended up, it made sense to me. I dropped my color I'm using, and I dropped it kind of in front towards me. Then I picked up my color A without pulling this very tight, because you just want it to lay up the side. Do your final yarn over. And before you do anything else, just make sure it's not, what you don't want to do is pull it tight and have a puckered edge. You want that to come up to the height of the stitch. Remember, you'll be seaming up these sides, so that's all going to disappear, okay? So once I've done that, I'm putting my yarn back, and I just got in the habit then of just bringing the yarn, whatever yarn I'm finishing with, bringing it forward, pulling out my new color, and continuing on. And that's what worked for me, okay? So, and then it looked the same, and I got a nice, on my ends, it just carried up correctly, okay? So it's not puckering, it's holding the height of all of the rows. And then again, that's all going to get caught up in the seam, so you're not even going to see it. But it's going to keep your rows nice and straight as long as you don't pull it too tight. All right, chain 1 and turn. Switching my yarn around. Okay, so now I'm back to the right side. I did 2 rows in my color B, which were identical rows. So I have chain spaces on top of chain spaces, singles on top of singles. And now I'm on row 5. Chain 1, put a single in the first stitch. 2 MDC. So MDC means mosaic double crochet. A mosaic double crochet is just like a regular double crochet. The mosaic part means where you're going to enter a stitch. We're not going to go up here on the row we just finished. In mosaic, you are going to go 3 rows down. So 1, 2, 3. And I would say every time I've done mosaic crochet, you're always going back to the color that's currently on your hook. Okay? So I need to make 2 mosaic double crochets 3 rows down. Now here's where knowing where the top of a stitch is becomes important. With this bulkier yarn, it's a little easier to see. Then I'm going to go in front of these chains, and I'm going to put a double crochet here and a double crochet here. When I say in front of the chains, I'm going to kind of fold them over a little. I'm only going to go into my gray color. And I'm going to do the first one, and I make sure that as I finish that double crochet, I'm back up to my height that I need to be at. If you tend to make these really tight and you feel like it's too low or too squished down, give yourself a little room here. Allow it to pull up a little bit, okay? I'm going to make the second one. I'm going to ignore those yellow chains and make my second MDC. So now I've covered up those chains and it looks like my gray color is carrying up. All right, then I'm going to chain 2. And it says to skip. I'm going to skip 1 stitch. And when they say a stitch, they mean, if she doesn't say MDC, then she means the last row you just did. So not the chain space, but the stitch. So I'm going to skip this stitch. And I'm going to do 1 MDC. So I'm going to skip the stitch. And I'm going to go over to the next 3 rows down and pull it up. And then I'm into my repeat now, chain 5. And remember, if you're chaining 5, you're going to be skipping 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Skip 4 stitches, 1 MDC. So I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to come here and do 1 MDC. And it looks like you're going a long way, but because you've got that little extra give in your chain, your double should be standing up really straight. So take the time at this point to double check that that's the case. If you make your chains very tight, you might find that it pulls in a little, and then you'll need to adjust. All right, maybe if you're just going to be a tight chainer, make 6 instead of 5. You can do that. No, make it work for you, or loosen up your chains a little. But we want these MDCs to stand up mostly straight, okay? You'll notice at this point, we are not connected to that last row at all, except for the very first single crochet we made. We've been making all of our actual stitches 3 rows down. That's where we're connected, okay? All right, so I did 1 MDC, chain 2, skip 1 stitch, and that's the end of my repeat to the last 3 stitches. Excuse me. 2 MDC. I'm going to make 2 right here. 1, 2. 1, 2. And then I'm going to do 1 single in the last stitch. So for that row, the only place we're connected to the last row of the yellow is the first single and the last single. Every other stitch is connected 3 rows down, all of our double crochets, okay? That's the way it's supposed to be. So if that throws you off, you're doing it right, okay? Now, row 6, I'm going to chain 1 and turn. Just the way that 3 and 4 mimicked each other, rows 5 and 6 are going to mimic each other. Almost exactly the same. You'll only be making the MDCs on the right side. So on the wrong side, instead of an MDC, you'll be making a single crochet, but your chains will be the same. So let's look at row 6. Chain 1, and we're going to do 3 single crochets. So a single in the first, and then the other 2 are going into the top of the MDCs from the previous row. Oops, right. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So remember, the top of this double crochet, the where you enter it is always slightly to the left of the post. Don't go into the chain space. It looks like it's leaning into the chain space, but you want to go in a single right there. Okay. So that's 3 singles. I'm going to guess, I'm not looking at the pattern yet, but I'm going to guess that I'm going to have a chain 3. Let's see. No, I'm sorry. A chain 2. Skip the chain 2 space. Put 1 single. So the top of that MDC right there. Now I'm going to chain 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And put 1 single. Chain 2. And then let's see how they word it here. Chain 2, skip the chain 2 space. I'm down to the last 3 stitches, and I'm going to put 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to change to color B. So I'm going to bring this forward, yarn over in my color, pull it through without pulling it down too much, chain 1 and turn. And then if you need to adjust your yarns, you can do it now. Okay, so we've done our foundation row. We've done rows 3 and 4 in color A. I'm sorry, in color B. Rows 5 and 6 in our color A again, and they mimicked each other. And that's going to be a pattern. So now 7 and 8 are going to mimic each other, and 9 and 10 are going to mimic each other. All right, we're back on the right side. We chained 1 to turn, a single in the first. And now chain 3, 1, 2, 3, skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, 1 MDC. So MDC, I'm going to skip and go down 3 rows below into the color that is currently on my hook. So skip this one, and we're going to do 1 MDC into that single we made right down here. In front of those chains. Okay. Chain 2. Skip the first stitch, which is right here. Now I'm going to do 4 MDCs. You can guess where they go. And I'm going to take a look and look first. What you don't want to do is look here where that first row went, because that actually, they lean a different direction. What you're going into is the second row that we put on top of those. Let me zoom in just a smidge. So the top of this single is right here. 2 is right here. 3 is right here. And 4 is, oh, I got it leaned over more. This is why it's important to look. You know what? I'm going to pull these forward. That's easier. Okay. So the top of this single is right here. 2, 3, 4. The last one that you make should be right before the chain space. So if it's easier to count backwards, that's what you should do to find your first spot, because they'll shift around a little bit. So I did my chain 2. I'm skipping this stitch and I'm making 4 MDC. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this should be the last opening right before the chain space. So I got that part right. All right, 4 MDC, chain 2, skip one stitch, put one MDC, and open that up a little. It's going to be on either, there's a chain space on either side, right in there. And then I do that all the way to the last 3 stitches, which is where I'm at. Chain 3, and do skip 2 stitches and put a single in the last stitch. You will find that the beginning of the row and the end of the row are always going to be symmetrical. So if you started with a single and a chain 3, you're going to end with a chain 3 and a single. And then your repeat happens in between, okay? So that worked out just fine. Again, now this color is not attached to this color except for the single at the front, at the beginning and the end. Chain 1 and turn. And now we're on row 8, 1 single, and it should mimic. We won't be making any MDCs because it's a long side row. We'll be putting singles there instead. 1 single, chain 3, skip the chain 3 space and put a single. Chain 2, skip the chain 2 space and put 4 singles. So the top of this single is right here. 1, 2, 3. And this is going to be right before the chain space, is the top of that last stitch. Okay. And I can see what's here. I'm going to chain 2, skip the chain 2 space and put 1 single here. And that's your repeat across to the last 3 stitches. Chain 3 and 1 single in the last. Oh, and we're changing back to color A. Take that back. Bring this forward. Bring that up. So you can see it just will lay across. Doesn't have to be too loose, just don't make it too tight. Okay. Chain 1 and turn. I'm gonna switch one round. Now we're gonna do the last 2 rows at the end of our row repeat. You know it's a single in the first. Okay, so 1 single, 2 MDC. So I'll skip these and go 1 and 2. Again, going in front of those chain spaces. And then do 1 single. So when you move from an MDC to a single, the single is going to be going into the stitch on the last row you did. Only if it says MSC, you would be doing a mosaic single crochet and you would be dipping down. If it just says single, I'm going to put a single in the top of this stitch. So now we are connecting colors where we haven't yet. Okay, so I did 1 single. Now here's my repeat, 1 MDC. Notice I'm not doing any chain spaces either. 1 MDC, 4 singles. So up here again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I should end right before a chain space, which I did. 1 MDC. one single, do the last 3 stitches, 2 NDC, one, two, and 1 single, finish it off. So now I've attached the color A and color B where we haven't in between our beginning rows. Now our wrong side row, chain 1 and turn. This is a really good place. If you've gotten this far and everything looks right and it's all lining up, chances are everything's going fine. Row 10 is to do a chain 1 and singles all the way across. This is a really good time to double check your stitch count. Make sure that you, before you start your row repeat again, that you have the correct number of stitches. So I think I should have 14. Because if you missed a single or something, it will throw you off for the next row repeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. All right, so you could then, if you go back to your pattern, then you're going to go back and repeat rows 3 through 10, which takes us right back to these first yellow rows, and it continues on. Okay, so those are your, this is a 10 row repeat. I'm sorry, it is a, yeah, it's a 10 row repeat that you've got, because you put the, almost like your foundation row again, here on top, and then it repeats. And then you'll continue on until it's as long as you want. Now, if you're making your strips to a certain length, and the certain length gets you halfway through a repeat, that's fine. And she tells you in here, let's see, or maybe it was on the next one she tells you. Make sure you, oh, finish, yeah, she does tell you. Finish on an even number row. She says repeat rows 3 through 10, finishing on an even numbered row. So if you only get through part of the repeat, totally fine. Finish this, and then you would go back, because then your next row would be to do a single all the way across, if that's what gets you to the right height. You don't have to go all the way through the repeat to make your strips match up, okay? That's totally fine. Are there any questions before I talk about the next ones? You guys are good. They asked lots of questions this morning, so hopefully I am hitting all of those points. The next square is the blocky. What'd she call it? Blocky spots, number 26. This is a multiple of, if you're doing this chain and then a single, multiple of 6 plus 8. I did a multiple of 6 plus 7 because I did a foundation row. This repeat, this is one full repeat of the row pattern. This is an 18 row repeat, because the next section here, it offsets the blocks, okay? Again, the same technique is going to happen. If you look at all of my samples, the backs are all the same. How you do the mosaic double crochet is all the same. It's just a matter of how many chains are you making, How many in between? What are you starting with? But the technique is all the same, okay? What I do want to show you, and I'll show you on this blocky one here. Let me do that one and then is, and she talks about this in her, on that page I told you at the back of the book, page 138. There is a way to make this more reversible. Okay. Right, so I'm just going to do a couple of rows of this one so that you can see it's really the same as what we just did. I did a foundation single crochet in a multiple of 6 plus 7. I'm going to start on row 3, and I got to change to my new color. The end of row 2, I changed to my new color. So yarn over with your new color and do your last yarn over. That technique holds true no matter what you're doing in crochet. If you make your last yarn over in whatever stitch you're doing, a single, a double, a triple, a post stitch, it doesn't matter. If you do the last yarn over in your new color, it will always make it look like you have finished the previous stitch in your old color and starting a new row in your new color. You can do it in the middle of a project, it doesn't matter. All right, row 3, chain 1 and turn. The ever-present single in the first stitch. And chain 2. Skip 1 stitch. And do 3 singles. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to get to the MDC so I can show you a different way to do it. 1, 2, 3. Now my repeat starts chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. And do 3 singles. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do this. That's my repeat all the way to the last 2 stitches, and I do have 2 left. And I'm going to chain 2. Remember, you're always chaining 1 more than the number of stitches you're skipping, and do a single in the end. Chain 1 and turn. And now I'm on row 4, 1 single. It will mimic our row 3. Chain row 4, 1 single, chain 2, skip the chain 2 space, and do 3 singles. So I think you're seeing a pattern here. And chain 4, here's my repeat. 2, 3, 4. Skip 3 stitches and do 3 singles. And I do this to the last 2 stitches. 2, 3. And chain 2. Skip the chain 2 space, put a single in the last stitch. I'm changing colors. Bring that one forward. Pick up my color A. Do my yarn over. Chain 1 and turn. So that should all look very familiar. What has only changed is the number of stitches we made and the number of chain spaces we created. That's what creates the mosaic. Row 5. So I'm going to show you a little bit different technique, and we'll see how it looks. Row 5, chain 1 and do 1 single. First stitch. And then she says do 1 MDC. This time, instead of going in front of the chains, I'm going to go over the chains. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to let that yarn come over. And I'm going to pull it up. So I'm still covering the chains, but I have gone completely around the chain. Okay, I'll show that again here. 1 MDC, chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip, sorry, skip 3 stitches. Here's my repeat, 3 MDC. So I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3. So right before that one, I'm going to go all the way through to the back, more like a normal double crochet. It takes a little more yarn to do that, so make sure you're still pulling it up so that it has some height here. There's 1. Feels weird after doing it in front of those chains. 2 and 3. Chain 4. Skip 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. To the last 2 stitches, do 1 MDC right there, going over the chain. Try that again. And finish with a single in the last stitch. Chain 1 and turn. So now on your back, they're not exactly double crochets, but it does give you, as opposed to having rows, you are going to have more of a mosaic design, and you can do it that way. I'm going to do the next row so you can see how that looks, but you got to decide that ahead of time if you want to do that or not. If you want it to be reversible, if that's something you're, it may not matter for this particular blanket, but if you're using this in another project, if you want to have a more reversible side going over the chains, we'll do that. Okay. Now I'm on row 6, chain 1, 2 single crochets. So into the last single I made and into the last mosaic double I made. And it should mimic what we did. So I should have a bunch of chains now, and I do. Chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip the chain 4 space and do 3 singles. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 4. Skip the chain 4 space to the last 2 stitches and do 2 singles. Switch to color B. Bring this forward. Up the tail. Leave this not tight, not loose. Just bring it up so that it's the same height that you need. Chain 1 and turn. Now we're on row 7. 1 single. Chain 2. Skip the first stitch, which is this. And we're going to do 3 MDCs. Remember, you're going color to color. So I'm going to skip this maroon. And I'm going to go over the chains this time. It does take a little more yarn to do this, by the way. 1. I'm using bulky yarn, so it kind of really stands out. 2. And 2. And did I do that in the right spot? Nope. Let's take a look here. I want to go 1, 2. I was in the right spot. 1, 2, and 3. Remember, you don't want to go into the chain space. So this is where the third one's going to go, the second one, and the first one's right there. A bit of chain. 1, 2, And because it's so bulky, it's really kind of fun. 1, 2, 3, and then 3 MDC chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Skip 3 stitches. So I'm going to skip 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to do 3 MDC. So I'm going to count again. So there's my chain space. So my last one will go there. That's the third. That's the second. That's the first. So sometimes it gets pulled under. So take a second to check to make sure you're going in the right space. Otherwise, you might find that your mosaic doesn't stand up straight. 2. Oh, I went in front of the chains again. I wanted to show you that differently. 1, 2, 3, to the last 2 stitches, chain 2, skip 1 stitch, single in the last. Okay. So what you then get is, it's not completely reversible because the backs of stitches, but it is more reversible like, if that makes sense. Personally, I like doing it in front of the chain spaces. I don't mind the stripiness on the back. But know that this is an option to do it that way if you want to, okay? Again, like I said, this is pretty bulky yarn, so this gets pulled up. If you're using a finer yarn, you're not going to get that huge pull up. So then this pattern, the blocky pattern, continues with, we would work back on a wrong side row, row 8, and we would switch our color, and then we would do row 9 and 10, which is exactly what we did on this one. You're going to end up putting your last row and then a row of singles across. And then it continues on because our next go round, the blocks aren't all going to line up. They're going to be offset in between, which is why it is a longer row. There's more repeats in the rows. This one repeats rows 3 through 18 as opposed to rows 3 through 10, so that you can get the offset. But the way the stitches work is exactly the same as the first one I showed you, okay? I want to do a quick, let me show you again, on this one, she does tell you to make sure you finish on an even numbered row on the blocky one. So because there's so many rows in the repeat, the odds that you're going to end exactly where you want it to at the end of a repeat are pretty slim. Just make sure you end with an even side row. And then you can go on and do your row of single. All right. Tiny dots, which started like, that was which row started? I guess this one. It's kind of a fun little stitch. The same thing, except we're doing more of the MDCs. We're not having bigger changes in the color. So this one, if you are doing the row of chains and then single, it's a multiple of 2 plus 8. I did the foundation, so it's a multiple of 2 plus 7. And take out my last turn over and color. Take your two ends and get them a little snug. And then once you make your chain one, should be good. And turn. Again, this is tiny dots, number 27. All right, row 3, we're going to start with a chain one single in the first. And it's got a little bit of an edge on either side of our repeat. So we've got like a little double edge, and then this will get caught up in the seam, this edging here. So you'll just have a peak of the dots on each end, and then what's in between is your repeat. All right, chain one single. Chain 3, skip 2 stitches. 1, 2, 3. Skip 2, and do 1 single. Chain 2, skip 1 stitch, 1 single. Chain 2, skip 1 stitch, 1 single. And you're going to do this all the way across to your last 2 stitches. I'm sorry, to the last 3 stitches. And chain 2, skip 1 single, and I have 1, 2, 3 left. And I'm going to chain 3, which is exactly what I started with. Again, the beginning mimics the end. 1 single in the last stitch. Chain 1 and turn. Row 4, 1 single in the first stitch. It's going to mimic 1, 2, 3. Chain 3, skip our chain 3 space and do a single in the top of the previous single. Chain 2 and a single, skipping the chain 2 space. So you're going to start to see this rhythm. You're not going to have to look at your pattern constantly. You might have to for the right side row, but you know that the wrong side row is going to mimic what you just did. And then finish with the chain 3 and a single. Forward, new color, go through chain 1 and turn. Okay, then row 5, oops, 1 single first, and then I'm going to do 2 MDC. This time I'm going in front of the chains. Let's see, row 5, and then 1 single. So since it didn't say Mosaic, I know I'm back up to the last row I just finished. So 1 single. And then it's 1 MDC. And 1 single. And 1 MDC. And 1 single. And 1 MDC. And 1 single. To my last 3 stitches. I'm sorry, to my last 2 stitches. I'm going to do 1 MDC in the right way. Oh, yes. My repeat ends with I'm sorry, the repeat ends with an MDC, so a single and then an MDC to the last 2 stitches. And then I'm going to do another MDC and end with a single. Again, just like the last 2 blocks we did, this row is attached several places, not just the beginning and the end, because we have so there's only short spaces in between. We don't have the longer runs of color. I think they end up looking less like dots and more like hearts, which I think is actually quite cute. I kind of like that. And then you continue on. This one is you'll repeat rows 3 through 6. So my next row, I will mimic back, and then I'm going to do row 5 would be to do the alternating with the yellow, and then do a row of singles back, which is how all of them are going to finish, and then you repeat your pattern. Is everybody clear about how this all works? That they're really the same, just different chain spaces, different numbers of stitches and where you're putting them. I hope that I made that clear.
Yes.
Yes, good. Yep. Are there any?
Absolutely.
Good. Are there any questions? I love mosaic crochet. I would say my top tips for this, let me stop sharing, would be to use that row of single crochet before you start your repeat. Make sure your stitch count is correct, because then it will always line up. And when you are, when you have to go and make those, 3, make sure that you're going into the correct 3, that you're looking to the top of the stitch that is just to the left. When you're doing something, and that's always going to be the case when you're turning crochet work over, if you're staying on the right side, like in a granny square, then the top of the stitch will always be to the right. When you're switching back and forth, it's always to the left. And since we're going 3 rows down, we're back to the left. If we were going 2 rows down, it would be to the, there's math. But when you're going back and forth and doing mosaic crochet, when you're skipping 2 rows, you're always going to be going into the top of the stitch that's slightly to the left of the post, if you're not sure where to go. And that will make everything line up nice and straight. I found I didn't have to, I thought I might have to change my tension a little bit or change my hook, and I didn't have to. I felt like it worked really well with the same hook I've been using. Doesn't feel loose, because you've got those extra chains to cover your spaces. It's got some give to it still. It's not a stiff fabric. If you find that you chain tight, that would be my other top tip. Add an extra chain if you need to, if you're a tight chainer. I feel like the more I went on, I started to kind of chain a little bit tight because I was kind of rushing through and wasn't thinking about it. But keep that in mind. So that's mosaic crochet.
I like it.
I like it too. I really do. So next time we're going to add some variants to it. So next time we're going to do number, I think we're doing, is it zigzags? I have it written down somewhere else. Oh, we're doing gentle waves, number 33. So you're going to see how you can shift it a little bit. And then we're going to do, I know we're doing the mosaic bobbles. So we'll show how you can add other elements to your mosaic stitches. I don't remember what the other one was. I thought there were 3, but I don't remember what they are. Stripy diamonds, number 35. Where you're getting a shape, a different kind of shape in both colors. So, well, they get a little more complicated as you go, but the technique is the same.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun. Ingrid, are you almost done with your blanket?
Oh yeah. Totally done. I skipped ahead, in fact,
Can I tell you how many of these little things I have where I have to go back and figure out what strip I'm actually going to do? So I've got to finish this. I need to feel like I finished something. So I have it on my
Maybe the trick is to do the mosaic strip first so you can match the length of the others to it.
That is not
I
a
was
bad
thinking about
idea.
that.
That's
Since
not a
I've
bad
not
idea.
finished any
That
strips,
was
I
my
could still
plan.
do that.
Totally my plan. Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
not
that's why we haven't finished any.
exactly, exactly. And that's the other thing, we talked about, working them up and leaving a length of yarn so that you could,
Yeah.
make them match
Mhm.
up. But when it comes time, make, the ones that you really want to, the other ones are easier to adjust.
Sure. Yeah,
You've only got a couple of
absolutely.
row repeat. This one is a little more complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. And I'm glad we can watch you again because I'm going to need to watch this again.
Yeah, I know.
like I said, if you get stuck, do look at that page 138. I found it after I didn't really look at it until after I went through them. She does a
Yeah.
really good. Now that you've watched this,
Mhm.
Mhm.
it will make a lot of sense in how you're doing it. So that I found it really helpful.
Mhm. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So no Zoom
Good.
tonight. Kim's knee and back
Mhm.
hurt apparently. So
Uh,
I'm gonna stop recording.